This is Change Your Mindset Podcast, the podcast that helps change your life by helping change the mindset of the 99% into the 1% mindset. Here's your host, Adrian Gomez.
Welcome back to another podcast episode of Change Your Mindset. As always, I'm your host, Adrian Gomez. So in this podcast, a lot of people might be wondering, why is so much of an agenda being pushed by corporate companies such as Disney, Target, Bud Light, so many more? Why all of a sudden are they into politics and have this agenda to go trans, gay, lesbian, etc.? Why all of a sudden? Companies used to sell you product and that was it. You'd be on your way. They wouldn't be shoving things down your throat, trying to force you to think a certain way nonstop. And obviously, these companies that are going, as we say, woke, are going broke for good reasons. Because people do not want this being shoved in their face, and now in the school systems, teaching their kids that they could be transgender, they can be whatever sex they want to be. They can now mutilate themselves to be the other sex, which is not reversible. And this is how messed up the society is going. And it's happening more and more often. But luckily, people are standing up and fighting against it. Because if people didn't, this would consume all of us, would consume all our lives, and would consume kids. So it's very important that you go against these companies, not support them, not buy their products. Because now they are suffering. Like Disney, for example, is losing millions, billions of dollars. Bud Light, for example, and Target, as we recently talked about, go woke, go broke. They're losing large amount of monies, and they're obviously rethinking their agenda and rethinking their wokeism. And the reason why these companies are now getting into politics where they were never in before, they were always neutral, is because a thing called the ESG scores, which stands for Environmental Social Governance. I'm reading an article that explains this very well. It's a great article. It's by the Mystic Sisters, and the title goes ESG, the hidden reason why so many companies are going woke. So the article starts off, whereas companies used to be largely politically neutral, focused only on selling products and services, in recent years we have seen an outright explosion of companies issuing statements on politically continuous topics. Political views on racial issues, LGBTQ issues, and other topics that have Americans strongly divided are often baked into marketing, messaging, and corporate decisions. Whereas this turn of corporate culture may seem totally organic, there is growing evidence that a sinister, top-down pressure is pushing companies to go woke. Rather than simply reflecting the views of politically left-wing marketing employees, these choices may have their roots in something known as ESG scores. Companies have transformed politically neutral providers of goods and services to advocates for so-called social justice causes in ways that typically align with left-wing thought. Following the death of George Floyd, many companies issued statements on policing and racial issues. Corporations now routinely turn their logos rainbow to signify support for LGBT Pride Month in June. And a great singular example of this is the viral feminist 2019 Gillette razor ad that framed normal male behaviors, such as rough and tumble play and approaching and flirting with women as toxic behaviors in need of social correction. Gillette, which wants to sell razors to men, seemed to be roundly condemning its core customer base. Instead of just selling razors, Gillette deemed it more important to reflect a left-wing view of social issues in its advertising. We see this again and again in corporate messaging today. Why? It's easy to think that companies are going woke organically, that socially progressive employees themselves are driving the change. But it turns out there is also top-down pressure for companies to craft their enterprises in ways that align with left-wing cultural and policy goals. ESG stands for Environmental Social Governance. According to Global Banking and Finance Review, ESG is an investment approach that assesses investment outcomes based on social goals in three areas. 1. Environmental. 2. Social issues. And 3. Corporate governance. While ESG criteria is not yet fully standardized, a corporation that does not merit a positive ESG score may be excluded from capital loans and other financial resources. And because ESG scores are criteria that align with left-wing thought on social, environmental, and policy issues, we see a lot of corporations going woke. Taken to their logical end, ESG scores are a way to weaponize the financial industry, using it to strong-arm companies into advancing specific social and environmental agendas. Multinational corporations like Disney, Procter & Gamble now have an incentive to act counter to what their customers want in an effort to improve their ESG score. As a response to investors, corporations will push an agenda that moves the overturn window to the left and advances left-wing causes. ESG scores have been fully embraced by the World Economic Forum, which has called the reporting of such scores increasingly essential and even required. A 2022 survey of 300 companies found that 61% have taken a public stance on racial equality. Since 2020, 44% on LGBTQ rights, and 39% on gender equality, among other left-wing social justice causes. This is why politics in the US now feels so totalizing. Whereas we used to be able to purchase a soda in peace, now your Coca-Cola comes with a side of in-your-face marketing messages about the corporation's stance on continuous political and cultural topics. Some corporations, such as McDonald's, have pushed back against political statements and corporate messaging. But the overwhelming majority of corporations are now taking social stance in the culture war. As it turns out, companies are being tracked on what they say about social justice and political issues, with financial institutions issuing decisions based on their compliance. Instead of looking at how profitable a company is, its business model, and other traditional metrics, ESG scores consider whether the company advances social justice causes and policy agendas that typically align with left-wing thought. With the financial industry issuing political compliance scores that encroach on the corporate space, there's also the fear that such scores could one day be extended to everyday people. With ESG scores being used to determine the financial future of companies, banks could one day make decisions about individuals based on their political stances and lifestyles. What you have said or not said about social justice issues, your personal carbon footprint, your social media presence, and more could impact whether you are allowed a business loan, a car loan, or a mortgage. It's all speculation, of course, but Communist China has shown us that social credit scores are entirely within the realm of modern possibility, and ESG scores are just one step on the path toward their acceptance. ESG scores do not allow room for dissent from a particular vision of society. Those who align with the left's view on social issues, big questions like what policing ought to look like, the role of women and men in society, meritocracy versus affirmative action, gun rights, and gun control, standards of behavior in media, or even abortion, will probably not be too worried about ESG scores, or will even see them as a good way to push companies in what they see as a positive direction. But those who dissent from the left's view on these issues and hold very different beliefs about the way to create prosperous societies will clearly see the trouble with ESG scores ahead. It's not necessarily bad for companies to think about the impact of their actions outside of the products or services they provide. It is bad when they are not free to make those decisions themselves, and when a top-down entity enforces for them what it means to be socially good. Consider the recent split between companies who believe they are engaging in social good when they fund their female employees' abortion travel, versus those who believe that this constitutes a social evil. If ESG scores one day take into consideration a company's stance on abortion, entities that refuse to fund an employee's abortion travel out of moral opposition could be considered unfit for financial services or investment. Downstream of ESG scores is a totalizing control of speech and thought. If individuals or companies must publicly issue support for left-wing ideas in order to operate in a marketplace, it's the end of free speech and thought. Taken to its totalizing end, ESG scores could usher in a one-party state, not via voting or force, but via slow culture changes to our financial system that make it impossible to operate in the marketplace as a person or company that has traditional or dissenting beliefs. We have already seen financial institutions punish people for their political beliefs, so it's not far off to imagine the scale of the ESG threat growing in this way. While woke marketing messaging may be a nuisance for conservatives now, the forces driving it could one day spell the total end of freedom. And that is the end of the article. Now I'm going to read you the Oscars' new diversity rules that you must oblige to win Best Picture nominations. So under the new rules, movies won't be considered for Best Picture nominations unless they meet two of the four new standards set in place that are, according to the Academy, designed to encourage equitable representation on and off screen in order to better reflect the diversity of the movie-going audience. One of the new standards is that a movie features a lead or supporting character who is from an underrepresented racial or ethnic group. Another standard can be that the movie has a main storyline focused on an underrepresented group in some way. Also, a movie can be a standard by having at least 30% of its cast come from two or more underrepresented groups. Again, if a movie does not meet two of the four provided diversity standards, it won't be considered for a Best Picture nomination by the Academy. Underrepresented groups include, according to the Oscars' new guidelines, Asian people, Hispanic people, Black people, Indigenous Native American people, Middle Eastern people, women, LGBTQ+ people, people with disabilities, and other underrepresented race or ethnic groups. The Oscars announced the new standards back in September 2020, but it won't be until the 96th Oscar 2024 that they take effect. So instead of the best person getting the role for a movie, this is how it's going to be. Whether to you that makes sense or not, that's up to you. Me personally, the best person should get the role. Person who is made for should get the role. But unfortunately, everything in this society is upside down, and they're pushing an agenda. And with these ESG scores, and now you see with the Oscars, that they are forcing you to accept this. They're putting this in your face whether you like it or not. Everywhere you go, everywhere you see, you try to buy something, you try to watch something, is the ESG score. They're pushing this down your throat, whether you like it or not. Like I said, politics never used to be in every single thing, and now it is. One way or another, you're already involved in politics, whether you like it or not. So now you know. All this is because of an ESG score. And if you don't like it, you obviously have to stand up and fight against it. Unfortunately, majority of people are afraid to fight, afraid to speak up, afraid to do anything nowadays. They just lay down and take the hits, play dead. Like I said before, some of us will keep fighting for a better future, for a better society, just for a better world. So there's a lot of evil going on, a lot of corruption, and some of us gotta fight the good fight. And hopefully this podcast did educate you on what's going on and why you see so much of this crazy wokeism everywhere you go. That's gonna be it for this podcast episode. I appreciate you guys as always for listening. Truly appreciate you. If you have a question or a comment or you have a topic for a podcast episode, you can be a Patreon member, and that helps you get access for that. And I will be saying your question, comment, or podcast episode on a future podcast. So the link will be in the description below. Thank you as always, Blade262, for being a Patreon member and supporting this podcast. Truly appreciate it and truly helps. Thank you guys again. Keep fighting this crazy wokeness. Keep fighting for a better society. Keep fighting the good fight. As always, I wish you the best. Take care. Be safe out there. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Change Your Mindset podcast. Be sure to tune in every week for a new episode. As always, change your mindset to change your life.